I welcome everybody today to our webinar, which is talking about biomass with clients and stakeholders. It's presented by Jeffrey Rubin, the founder of sustainableheating.org. And Jeff is here. We'll be starting his part of the presentation in the next few minutes. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our organization. We are Frolling Energy. We're based in Keene, New Hampshire. And we are a mechanical contractor, that is being able to do piping and boiler systems and that sort of thing. But our focus is on biomass boiler systems. And the systems are not just any old boiler we can put in, but they're high efficiency, very low emission, and commercially oriented, although we do some residential work as well. Our focus has been, I should say, our success has been on school buildings and campuses. That's where the majority of our big commercial projects are. We also are doing many commercial buildings, industrial buildings. We do our biggest customer is an industrial campus over in Southwest New Hampshire. We also have some multifamily buildings, such as this Applegate Apartments over in Bennington, Vermont. We tend to cover most of New Hampshire and Vermont and get into Mass and even Maine and New York State are possible, but our focus really is New Hampshire and Vermont. We are a self-performing contractor. That just means that if it's a boiler system renovation that might include something like this boiler building and a silo and all that, we'll take care of all of that, trenching to get a pipe indoors, running pipes through the building, that sort of thing. That all can be done. We aren't going to, change your windows or anything like that, but we are going to be able to execute a good biomass system installation. Technical consulting on biomass boiler systems is something we do all the time, and we encourage people to give us a call, whether you're an engineer, an architect, or a building owner, or just a person with ideas about their community or some particular buildings that they might be involved with. And we're very happy to talk to you about it and talk about feasibility as well as getting down into the specifics of that project to see if it's feasible, to see if it, we can be value engineered into a better system and so forth. One of the things that we've done here is we saw the wood pellets were out there and green wood chips 10 years ago. That's all you had access to. And about 7 years ago, we decided to bring this European idea, which is a dry wood chip. So it's just a slightly processed wood chip. We screen them down to about the size of a matchbook, and we dry them to 25% moisture content. It is boll wood, so it's very much a pure wood without much bark and certainly no leaves or anything like that. And we deliver them by blower truck, which is part of the innovation. They can be delivered in a big semi and put up into a vertical silo, which is a very economical way of storing and delivering, I should say, feeding chips into a boiler system. So all in all, it's worked out very, very well. And there's nearly 20 systems out there right now in New England using these chips. So today we're talking about biomass with clients and stakeholders. That is, if you were needing to speak to someone about biomass with your clients and stakeholders, that this might give you some ideas of about that. Jeff Rubin is going to be doing this presentation, and he's a writer, educator, and real estate investor and a passionate environmentalist. After a 30-year career in marketing and communications, in 2017, he founded sustainableheating.org with a team of experts in the field of climate and heating, finance, and branding. And this website is dedicated to helping people make climate-smart heating choices. If you haven't been there, you should go. A lot of good information. Jeff's an award-winning creative director with over a decade of experience running the marketing efforts of a wood pellet boiler company, as well as an admitted heating geek, and he holds a HVAC certification with an endorsement in wood heating. Through his combined backgrounds in communication, real estate, contracting, behavioral science, and heating technology, he's got a unique perspective on the challenge of simplifying these complex, disruptive, and climate-critical issues that are inherent in clean heating. So his talk with us today is all about how we can play a vital role in moving America towards our needed clean heat future. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for all the people that dialed in today. It's a terrific turnout. I'm so happy. I'm Jeff Rubin, founder of sustainableheating.org. We're a nonprofit education institution. We don't favor or have any bias for any brand or even any technology. Pellet, chip, geothermal, solar, hydrogen, fuel cell, it's all good with us as long as it works to better the climate and as long as it's practical and affordable. And as long as it's field-proven technology with a functioning infrastructure so people can install it today. So not hydrogen fuel cell yet, but when it's real, we'll be all over it. We have accredited programs for heating professionals, homeowners, environmental groups, realtors, and sustainability students. And basically what we do is simplify the complex relationship between heating science and climate science so people can make their own best choices when it comes to heating. My goal today is for you to take away the data and context to build the climate case for wood heat. At the end of the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to receive a free climate smart heating presentation deck for you to use for your own presentations, complete with key talking points and co-branded with your company logo and the Sustainable Heating imprint. Before our time today is over, you'll have everything you need to handle these challenging questions. But before we start, I'd like to ask you to adopt the mindset of a teacher. Please shift your approach today from a passive learner to an active teacher in training, because good communication is all about making sure other people feel heard, that we are on the same climate and economic side, and that we are here to help them, your toughest audience, have everything they need to feel like they are on the right side of the climate debate. I'm going to start with a letter that came into our local Vermont digger. As you can see, the title is Wood Burning is Vermont Hypocrisy. So you can see where this is going. And our writer writes, we are facing climate choices that will determine the future of living on Earth. So it's a big question. Wood burning creates particulate pollution that damages human health while speeding global climate change. Wood is not an instantly renewable fuel source. It takes 50 to 75 years for a newly planted tree to grow to its full carbon absorbing potential. Our carbon dioxide emissions need to go down now, not 50 years from now. Vermont has no old growth virgin forests remaining over 10 acres in size. The trees in our woods look like toothpicks as a result of logging. Even loggers can't find trees large enough for making boards. Residential wood burning is hypocritical. Ouch. We don't allow cars and trucks to drive around belching out a cloud of smoke. So why do we permit our homes to do so? State and federal policies that encourage electric cars, heat pumps, and solar energy, while at the same time promoting wood burning, are hypocritical and delusional. Vermont environmental laws put money interests first. All of us should be concerned about the future of the earth. Wow, that's a lot. But I'm going to take you through all of those arguments and more. The problem is that the whole wood heat story is actually pretty counterintuitive. For those of us who care about climate, this is way too important to accept easy assumptions. I can see why this guy thinks what he thinks, but these are incredibly consequential questions. So let's take a moment to quickly put some context on why heating matters in the world of green energy. First of all, why it matters for individuals. And I know so first of all, this is a residential heating graph. So everybody's talking about solar and wind, but throughout New England, heating is by far the biggest part of the problem. 75% of home energy use when you combine heat and hot water. Now, I know that you guys in the room are mostly on the commercial rather than the residential side, but this goes double for commercial projects where people are more numerous and typically buildings are not as well insulated. Because we are commercial and a lot of people enjoy our buildings, we have a special opportunity to lead and educate. When we model green energy behavior, we can get into people's imaginations. So now, why it matters to climate. And I want to credit Jared Duval at the Energy Action Network for this graphic. Sorry. Throughout New England, only transportation accounts for more greenhouse gas emissions than building thermal. You know, I need to take a side trip here for a minute. The words we use matter. Do we have to say building thermal? I think our industry is better served by just saying heating. we have a lot of jargon in this industry, and I think it gets in the way. And we need a bumper sticker, and I don't mean a literal bumper sticker. I mean we need a short, concise, compelling way to speak to people. There's a ton of talk and marketing and incentives for solar panels, but electric generation is way less than heating, both in terms of individual building from the last slide and also for our collective climate interest. Look at this. When we talk about transportation, every home basically has 2 cars, but only 1 heating system. So if you made that blue graph just one of those cars, you would see that space heating would really be very significant in comparison. When your clients are considering a green energy investment, what makes the biggest dent in their carbon footprint? Solar, transportation, or heating? Up here, it's always heating. So here's some context. How clean can we really heat with today's available, practical, affordable heating technology? When it comes to heating New England homes, we're not able to get to carbon free, and even carbon neutral is going to be a stretch. That's not an opinion, it's the physics of heating. First and foremost, we need to help our environmental brothers and sisters understand the basics of heat loss geography and thermodynamics. The world is not a perfect place, and we cannot wait for the perfect, even if it's on the horizon, in terms of our real world, practical, affordable options. Waiting for the perfect is the path to climate catastrophe. We need to reduce climate impacts from heating with current technology that's available now. And as they say, we don't have 10 years to wait. And every decision to install fossil fuel systems now will be adding geologic carbon to the atmosphere for the next 25 years, because that's how long a heating system lasts. This is urgent. Today's decisions matter. We need to do better now. And I can hear the questions, right? What about solar heating? What about geothermal heat pumps? And by the way, can we please call them ground source heat pumps? Geothermal is what they have in Norway, but I digress. Let this slide sink in for a second. Let this slide sink in. No matter how well we weather seal and insulate our existing New England buildings, we're going to need boiler temperatures at 180 degrees to keep up with the building's heat loss. That's not opinion, that's not conjecture, that's physics. I wish it wasn't so, you wish it wasn't so, but that's the reality, and this is too important for wishful thinking and academic exercises into technologies that will be here one day. Now, I suppose you could do some radical, expensive building modifications to super insulate the building envelope, but that kind of budget and disruption of ongoing building operations is not going to be an attractive option in most cases. And even with unlimited budget, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that you're going to get that heat loss down to a level where a heat pump can keep up, right? Because you can see the blue section of the graph. A heat pump can get up to 140 degrees, but here in New England, you need 180 degrees. Now, also consider that the need for combustion output temperatures are particularly leveraged compared to heat pumps in commercial applications, right? Because in commercial applications, you find big spaces, big loads, and lots of mechanized forced ventilation that increases the heat loss. Now, this example is from John Sigenthaler. That's a lot of people in the room, I'm sure, know who John is. We partner with him. And what this shows is that in terms of comfort and affordability, our heat pump's magic is limited. This orange triangle is the balance point at which the temperature drops and the heat pump can't keep up with the building's heat loss, right? So what this means is that on the coldest 4 to 6% of days, not very many days, you're actually using 15 to 20% of your annual heat load. On a very small amount of days, you're using 20% of your heat load. Now, it's true that a brand new building can be super insulated to operate well with a ground source heat pump, but the systems are expensive and they need to be ready for potentially very high electric bills and mechanical service costs, and that can add up fast due to the complex nature of these systems. But for retrofits, right, it's even harder. The principle of practical incrementalism, thank you, Jim, makes clean, renewable wood chip or pellet systems easy to justify. If there's an existing distribution system in the building, then the least cost approach is to maximize insulation and weather sealing and keep using whatever's there. My argument is always that here in New England, where it gets really cold, you need combustion. And that limits our choices to oil, gas, and wood. And only one of those is renewable, but gas is clean, right? What's the biggest trend in heating today? All over this country, oil boilers and furnaces are being replaced with ones that burn natural gas. Little problem, natural gas is a huge lie. Now, it's true that carbon dioxide in natural gas is lower than in oil, but methane is more than 25 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So the red part of this graph, that's the methane. And I've actually heard numbers way higher than 25 times more powerful greenhouse gas. When you combine both carbon dioxide and methane, natural gas is as bad as coal. And according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, 5.7 million homes still heat with oil. About half of them are going to need to be replaced over the next 10 years. And the kind of world we leave for our children hinges in large part on how we handle those replacements. We, on this call, we have an opportunity to counter this. Whenever we open one new mind, we leave the climate a little better for our kids. So I encourage you to speak up. Natural gas is as bad as coal, and people need to know that. Now, people think solar is the holy grail, right? But this kind of solar in the photo, this is actually electric heating, right? We have net metered photovoltaic solar panels powering cold climate heat pumps, or maybe it's a geothermal heat pump or an air to water heat pump, whatever, it doesn't matter. Either way, solar heating is really electric heating. And you need a lot of solar to power heat pumps. But let's say price is no object. You've got the solar fields to balance out your heat pumps. Do we get to carbon-free heating that way? So PV solar is designed to produce extra, send back extra in the summer, but it draws from the grid in the winter. And over the course of a year, your solar production and heat pump combination is designed to be balanced, right? So that means we are cost neutral, terrific. As long as your solar panels are on site, you're also carbon neutral, or even better. Fantastic, right? Terrific. The question is, are solar panels carbon free? And I'm not talking about the whole life cycle accounting, right? I'm not talking about manufacture and installation and transportation. I'm just talking about the energy that powers your site-specific heat pumps. Is that carbon free? Well, with or without solar panels, during the winter, you're pulling electricity from the grid to run those heat pumps. That huge chunk of energy we need for heating has to come from somewhere. So using those backup resistance heaters, the electric heaters, the resistance heaters in your heat pump for auxiliary heat, it's not only expensive, it pulls from the grid. So your environmental impact will depend on the fuel mix of your local utility. And right now, that's a pretty awful proposition. 31% of annual US carbon emissions comes from electric generation, right? Mostly coal and natural gas. We know natural gas is bad. So that's 31%. That's a third compared to all the transportation, all the industry, you know. This single chunk of heating, of electric, is huge. Now it's getting cleaner, but getting rid of that last 2/3 of fossil fuels is not going to be easy. The fossil fuel interests stand to profit, are you sitting down, $33 trillion by maintaining the status quo and continuing to really store geologic hydrocarbons for the next 25 years. That's their plan. Take it out of the ground, put it in the atmosphere. These richest companies in the history of money are using their immense resources to create a global disinformation campaign. And I want to call your attention to a behavioral construct called the bystander effect. Gasoline from algae, sounds great. Jet fuel from garbage, terrific. The bystander effect says we've got this and you don't have to worry about anything. It's all designed to lull us into complacency. Now, some people talk as if electricity is the magical, clean, holy grail just because they don't see the combustion on their site. If your local grid is mostly coal, it doesn't matter if you ponied up for a Tesla. You're driving a coal-powered car. How do people not get that? Well, the answer is advertising. The answer is the bystander effect. The answer is we all just want to believe we're doing the right thing. And I think the anti-biomass forces are good people who deeply believe they're doing the right thing, and in many ways they are. But isn't getting to the cleanest possible heating solution something we should all be able to agree on? We are not going to solve the climate crisis without dealing with the heating sector. Now, maybe it's just that no one's taken the time to detail the full picture of the real-life limitations of today's heating science. These people all have heating systems. What do they heat with? You and I, in this call, have the opportunity to make a real impact by making the complex nuances of heating simple for the layperson. So in this talk, we're mostly talking about wood pellet and chip system, and that's appropriate because we're in New England. But from the New York tri-state region south, my presentations talk mostly about heat pumps because geographically, heat pumps can carry the load down there as long as you do a good job insulating and air sealing. But heat pumps also have a place in New England. And in sustainable heating, we see plenty of scenarios where heat pumps are added because people want to add air conditioning in the summer and reduce their fossil fuel use in the spring and fall, right? There's a little bit of an issue figuring out when to switch over to your central heating system from your heat pumps. You know, you want to do that before the heat pump totally loses its favorable energy profile. Now, you pros in the room probably know more than I do, but I think that with mini splits, you have to make that call manually, whereas with whole house building heat pumps, there may be some automated switch systems out there that will switch over automatically. 2 points here. First, I think you need to be ready to address the scenario. If you're talking to constituents that are thinking about a new heating system, you need to be able to run a comparison analysis of the climate implications of reducing reliance on your oil or gas boiler by adding heat pumps. But you have to also add back the greenhouse gas profile of those heat pumps, which would now include summer air conditioning. So the factors you want to be considering would include the cost, the practicality of installing multiple systems, and the fuel mix of the local grid. And that's not so easy to find out, right? This is the 2019 fuel mix for Green Mountain Power. That's where I live in Vermont. It's pretty clean thanks to a lot of hydro and nuclear. There is still a little natural gas in there buried in the market purchases, but certainly we're doing a better job here than in most of the country. This is a cleaner, much cleaner grid than in most of the country. But they also do a better job reporting, right, than other utilities. I've checked, and it's a quagmire. I mean, they're just hiding and obfuscating and making it as complicated as possible to get to the truth. And I think that one of the things our climate activist brothers and sisters could do that would really empower grassroots consumer choice would be to lobby for a fuel mix and greenhouse gas disclosure label to be published, just like on food, as a licensing requirement for U.S. electric utilities. How is it that we don't already have that? So, yeah, that's something I'd like to see happen. Well, anyway, if you find yourself in the enviable position where cost is no object, I think the absolute best climate option would be solar-powered heat pumps for air conditioning and heating in the shoulder seasons, combined with a pellet or chip boiler to cover the heating load when the heat pumps can't keep up with heat loss. That solar heat pump, pellet or chip boiler, that leads to the lowest overall emissions we can get to here in New England. One last point about electricity. A lot of the anti-biomass rhetoric is about using trees for electric generation. And I listened to an interview on PBS with the filmmakers of Burned. For those of you in the room who know, Burned is a very anti-biomass movie. Anyway, the filmmakers didn't really have a problem with heating. They were asked about this specifically. I think they just didn't think about it much. But they never intended to conflate heating with electricity. We need to decouple clean renewable heating from biomass for electric generation, right? Clean renewable heating at 80, 90% efficient with no other better choices, with biomass for electric generation, which is, 25% efficient, and we have lots of better choices. This gives us an opportunity to validate our critics. Our values are actually very aligned. We are all threatened by climate change. We agree there are better ways, cleaner ways of creating electricity than using biomass. But when it comes to heating in New England climates, our only practical and affordable choices are oil, gas, and clean, renewable, plentiful waste wood. That's just the reality of the current state of heating technology. So think about that. What other options do we have? We're going to heat our buildings and there's no free lunch. Our choices come down to oil, gas, wood pellets, wood chips. If we don't get heat from the biogenic cycle, the only other option is digging it up and releasing geologic carbon, which adds to the total amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that's a big part of how we got in this mess in the first place. So I carry these slides on my phone, so when it comes up, I have the data backup to make my point. When it comes to heating New England buildings, solar heat pump magic is limited, and our only combustion options are oil, gas, and wood. That's it. Now, generally, I've found people want to do the right thing as long as it's affordable and it's not inconvenient. So let's help them understand this basic concept. Biologic or geologic carbon. It's not ideal, but we can't throw out the better while we wait for the perfect that may never come. Here's another graphic I carry on my phone, and I want to credit Northern Forest Center for this. The principle of practical incrementalism, right? Human nature favors incremental change. We need to deal with the heating fuels and systems that exist now and can get approved by school boards and town votes. When we repurpose our existing conventional HVAC distribution buildings to be fueled with lower cost, clean renewable wood pellets, they are our audience. They need to feel confident that they're on the right side of both the climate and economic questions. The way to build consensus is to give our constituents the data and words they can use to show they are insightful and altruistic, and I want to talk more about that in a moment. One thing I've noticed is that many of our biomass detractors come from academia. Byrne the movie came from Marlborough College, Professor Moonwalk from Tufts. Heating is not an intellectual exercise, and there's no free lunch. We need to choose from the practical, affordable heating fuel technologies that are available today, even though none of them are perfect. We can't afford to rely on the concept of the electrification of everything. We're just not there. Here's another graphic I carry on my phone. Twice as much as a Prius and 3 times more than solar panels. Switching from an oil boiler to one that runs on clean, renewable wood pellets is a homeowner's greatest carbon footprint savings. Greatest potential carbon footprint savings, switching from an oil boiler to a pellet boiler. Again, this is residential, but it's leveraged for commercial. And I'm just showing you the top of this graphic. This is a full page of data. We laid out exactly, we show our work. We showed exactly, and you can find this on our website pretty easily, or I'll send it to you if you want it. But we show you exactly how we calculated these numbers. It was done by Adam Sherman, who some of you may know at the Biomass Energy Resource Center. The real carbon savings that we came up with was closer to 9 tons, but we want to be conservative. We want to be conservative. Now, I know most of you work with commercial facilities, but people learn through stories. So here's a simple story. It's a residential story, but it's a simple story that makes the point. You ready? Dick and Jane are committed to doing everything they can to leave a healthy climate for their kids. They saved about $3,000, and their local bank offers low interest loans for green projects in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, right? That's $20,000, $30,000 that'll buy you solar panels, hybrid car, or a wood pellet boiler. For that kind of money, what's their smartest play? Well, it's a no-brainer, right? But wood has a reputation for being terrible for the environment, right? Both in terms of carbon and particulates. So let's address that, because this was, particulates came up in our initial letter, right? So let's take a look at particulates next. People talk as if the technologies of 40 years ago haven't changed, but over the past 30 years, the EPA has been raising the standard on wood heat to the point that now the particulate standard for a pellet boiler, stay with me, the particulate standard for a pellet boiler is 5 times cleaner than a gas boiler and 8 times cleaner than an oil boiler, right? So the EPA is holding our industry to a standard that's magnitudes higher than the fossil fuel industry. So let's make sure we're keeping it real when we talk about particulate emissions. There's really not much difference between the EPA standards for the 3 typical central heating combustion fuels: oil, gas, and wood pellets. But let's also be honest about the health effects of all this, right? Because I've heard people very distressed, throwing out their wood stoves, which are now 140 times cleaner than the wood stoves of 33 years ago. People are distressed about the health effects. But just like cars and trucks and airplanes and cruise ships, heating emissions are not good for human health. But even there, pellets are the better choice because while emissions from wood heating is a known irritant in the lungs, emissions from fossil fuels is a known carcinogen. We don't live in a perfect world. All right, enough about that. What about the idea of cutting down all our forests for heat? That sounds like a terrible idea, right? And I found that a lot of people just don't think about the difference between preservation and conservation. First of all, most US forests are not protected. Almost 60% are privately owned and managed to produce lumber, paper, wood pellets, other wood products. And in the process, working forests also protect wildlife habitat. They lower wildfire risk, protect watersheds, they sequester carbon, and not unimportantly, they foster energy security. Now, in Vermont, 86% of forests are privately owned. And here's the big thing. The average age of a Vermont landowner is 70-something, and there's no succession plan. The next generation is going to step forward and look at that asset. And I don't blame them. Their only financially responsible option is going to be to sell it for development. This is a real and urgent threat right now. Consider these 2 things. There is not enough public and private money to preserve all of US private forest land. And B, the development value of land is always greater than its economic value as a working forest. The development value is greater than its economic value. So there's always this incentive out there to develop woodlots. Currently, we are losing 22 acres of forest per day here in Vermont. Same thing goes in Massachusetts. They're losing 22 acres of forest per day to development. And once it's lost, that forest is never coming back. Development is the real threat. Development is the real threat. And so anybody on the call from New Hampshire that knows the percentage of forest land that we're losing to development, if you would send that to Jim in the chat, I'd be really interested to know that. There may be somebody on the call that knows that data point. We need to encourage people to consider the difference between preservation and conservation. Now, certainly some forests should remain protected, preserved, untouched, but in order to keep our woodlands, we must also incentivize conservation of working forests by incentivizing grassroots consumer choice for clean, renewable wood pellet and wood chip heating. There's 3 ways that wood reduces carbon. The first one is to reduce the heating emissions compared to oil and gas, like we saw on the previous slide, a couple of slides ago. Second, using wood for buildings and other wood products is a good thing because all the carbon that's stored in those projects and products is locked up for generations. Sequestration of, and the third thing is that building with wood also requires less fossil fuel than other building materials, right? Steel, concrete, metals, and plastics, they all require more carbon than building with wood. So sequestration and substitution of fossil fuels are 2 vital reasons we need some forests to be working forests. But that good carbon magic that a tree does is limited. That part of the tree that can be used for making stuff and sequestering carbon, that's only about 20% of the tree. That high grade That high grade is where the money is for landowners, those high grade saw logs. But it's markets for low grade, the leftover, the other 70 or 80%, that drives, that other waste wood drives responsible, sustainable forestry operations. And if we hope to protect the country's private forests from development, we need to find a replacement market for that low grade pulpwood, right? It used to be used for making paper. We all know how many mills have closed, the money lost, the jobs lost, the communities lost. We can rebuild those markets with wood heat. And we also help landowners resist the lure of profits from development, and we incentivize forest conservation. It sounds like a win-win to me. But that still leaves one big question from our Vermont Digger letter. So I'm going to quote, wood is not an instantly renewable fuel source. It takes 50 to 75 years for a newly planted tree to grow to its full carbon absorbing potential. Our carbon dioxide emissions need to go down now, not 50 years from now. I absolutely agree. First of all, trees don't wait 50 years to start sequestering carbon. In fact, the rate of sequestration is front loaded, right? Take a look at this graph. The majority of carbon sequestration happens in the first years of growth, and that rate levels off over time. The point is, young trees are actually our fastest carbon absorbers. So I need to credit Dr. William Strauss at Future Metrics for this graphic. And this next part of the carbon sink timeline, that's from Professor Malmsheimer, so thank you. It's counterintuitive, but the sentiment that we only have 10 years, and that's why we shouldn't cut any trees now, because we don't have 50 years to recover that carbon. That's exactly what will lead to dangerous levels of deforestation and CO2 in the atmosphere. The 2007 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment states that long-term cumulative CO2 emissions, the emissions that are always reduced by using forest biomass to produce energy, are correlated with projected peak global temperatures. So if we want to limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees centigrade or 2 degrees Fahrenheit, we need to use forest biomass, because doing so reduces long-term cumulative CO2 emissions. Managed forests continue to grow and sequester carbon, and removing select trees from overcrowded stands can release the residual stand and increase the amount and quality of wood grown and the amount of carbon sequestered in subsequent years, as compared to a stand that's not thinned. In the long term, a sustainable forest management strategy aimed at maintaining or increasing forest carbon stocks while producing an annual sustained yield of timber, fiber, and energy from the forest will generate the largest sustained mitigation benefit. Boilers have a 20 to 25 year life. Buying one today is a commitment to buy that fuel for the next 2 decades. Our most vocal climate change activists correctly state that we have just 10 years to act before some big environmental changes happens. What should we use? Oil? Gas? Look at this graphic. Notice how much the rate of CO2 emissions from coal, oil, and natural gas is accelerating. This is the real threat to climate. Anytime we can produce our energy out of wood rather than out of steel, plastic, or concrete, we're using recycled carbon, carbon that has already been circulating in the atmosphere. Therefore, we're not adding any geologic carbon to the total carbon in the atmosphere. And finally, as you can see from the brown land use change area at the bottom of the graph, humans are doing a better job addressing deforestation. Deforestation is still a problem in the tropics, but here in the US, private forest stocks have been increasing because of the strong demand for forest product, right? We live in a commercial society. But that's gone down. We've lost those paper mills. This is where pellet and chip heating can rebuild that market and that disincentive to development. Every time someone or some group is successful at stopping a wood pellet or wood chip boiler, they're pushing for another 25 years of this. I don't understand how anyone who cares about the climate could advocate for more of this. And Professor Melmsheimer, if you're on the call, if I got any of that wrong, I'd love it if you'd speak up in the Q&A session, because I feel it's just so important to be precise about this. Now, in order for all of this forest talk to work, we need to be harvesting responsibly and sustainably. And this is where our critics could be absolutely right. We must incentivize conservation of responsibly managed working forests. Now, this could be on a regional level, and I think of it like a CSA. Everybody know what a CSA is, right? Community supported agriculture. That's where groups get together and they support local farmers. They buy direct from the farmers, and they support them that way. Well, we could think of the Northeast Wood Heat region as a community supported forest, where consumers can vote for healthy forests with their heating dollars and know where their heating fuel comes from. And for that, we need some kind of procurement verification. The Forest Stewardship Council, the Certified Energy Forests, and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, those organizations already exist to verify procurement. They give consumers the power to incentivize responsible, sustainable forest practices by choosing products that come from certified sources. Now, that's the regional story, but it could be done on a very local level. You got a specific school project? I want to call your attention to this wonderful model of how one Vermont school worked with specific local landowners to power their heating system, their school's heating system. And this book, Harnessing the Power of Local Wood Energy, is about the Mount Abram Unified School here in Vermont that developed a heating plan for their school that reflects their values. Wow, I love that. A joint venture between the Forest Guild and a graduate student from the Yale School of Forestry and Mount Abe's own physics teacher and students, the community came together to give local landowners a financial incentive to engage in sustainable forest management using this self-standard that they developed. And you can see there that self stands for sustainable, efficient, local, and fair. The whole project is laid out in this step-by-step guide that explains how you can lead a project just like this yourself. And by engaging the community, everyone knows where their heating fuel comes from. We all fight climate change together. We all support local landowners in protecting their lands from development. And this local first approach keeps heating dollars and jobs right in the community, right? I'm sure you all know the data point that oil, for every dollar we spend on oil, 87% goes overseas into countries that just hate us. We are understandably focused on the technology, but we must, on heating technology, right? We're all into that world, but we must acknowledge and respect this part of the equation if we are to connect with our wood heating skeptics. So now we get into behavioral science, and this is where the rubber really hits the road. And the point is this: the greatest marketing opportunity is to get into people's imagination. If you can get into that space, you don't need a budget, and there's no time limit. How do we get into people's imagination? Well, the data is clear. We connect with them based on shared values and beliefs. And for this, we can learn from Maslow's hierarchy of need. People are driven to increase their social capital by appearing insightful and altruistic, right? They want to show that they have insider knowledge or that they know about things that are remarkable. They will choose to talk about things out of a personal passion. People want to be able to say, look at this remarkable thing I found. That's the goal. School board, planning commission, hospital directors, we want them to be amped up about this remarkable, underappreciated green energy that they figured out. We need to help them see this fight as their achievement. So they need the confidence that they can gain the respect of their stakeholders. This is how we enable intrinsic motivation. We have an amazing win-win clean climate story to tell. The problem is it's a little complex, it's kind of counterintuitive, and it's very, very invisible, right? We are hidden in the basement. And studies show that the number one driver of green energy adoption is knowing what your neighbor knows. Visibility. We're in the basement. Visibility is both our original problem and top of the list for social contagion. People want credit for doing the right thing. People want to wear that green energy badge on their sleeve so that everyone knows how insightful and altruistic they are. It's a direct correlation. Love this story. In San Francisco, homes on the north side of the street are selling for more than homes on the south side of the street. Why is that? Same school district, same distance to the supermarket. Well, if your home is on the north side of the street, your roof faces south. And everyone walking on the street can see your solar panels and know how green and altruistic you are. I'm sorry to make it so cut and dry, but that's how we operate, below the surface anyway. Anyway, outdoor bins could be our solar panel if we put signage on it, right? If people think there's coffee beans in there, it doesn't do us any good. That's the note we want to hit. This is the point. That's the note we want to hit. We want to appeal to people's intrinsic motivation to display their green energy bag. We want them loud and proud about their role in saving emissions and bringing the entire climate smart heating green energy project to their community. And I believe with the right data and messaging, we can get them there. Here's another one on visibility. And maybe it's just because I'm a heating geek, but I found this very entertaining, right? So we've got this display and it shows how many pounds of carbon they've offset and how much solar. This is a whole solar heat pump building in Vermont. How many trees? They haven't saved any trees just now, but they've offset 2.5 pounds of coal. This was a brutally cold day. So they have their current weather there as well. And you know, this building had huge walls of windows and it's all heat pump and it was frigid, windy, bitter. It made me wonder, how is this not hella expensive? You know? Well, look at the size of that solar field. I can't help but wonder, was this really the most efficient way to go? Even with all these panels, don't you think they were still pulling power off the grid with wind chills in the 20 to 30 degree below zero range? Anyway, the point is, we can tell that story too, and we're almost there, right? So this display is a Froling display that shows the operations of a heating plant. All we need to do is add real-time carbon savings data to the display they already have, right? We can add that comparison data based on BTU output. It'd take somebody smarter than me, but I'm sure that we can find an IT person with the skills to add that to the display. So we talked a minute ago about Burn the Movie, and this is something that's going on out there that I don't understand. We have smart, concerned environmentalists that do things like make movies like Burn, which is, in terms of heating, leading us in not a good direction, you know? And then we have this Upper Valley group that's being very successful in their messaging against biomass. You know, the Massachusetts incentives went away. New Hampshire incentives are under attack. In Vermont, they just sent the movie Burned on email to all registered Democrats. Same thing with the Professor Moonwa Proforestation Standing Trees Vermont Zoom. They are being successful. They're good communicators. You and I together on this call have an opportunity, maybe even a responsibility, to be at the vanguard in truth around the science of heating and the science of climate. We must not conflate wood for dirty 25% efficient electric generation with renewable 80 or 90% efficient wood for heating. You know, I had a note on this. It seems to have gone away. I actually saw a PBS presentation after they showed a screening of Burned with the filmmakers, and they were asked specifically about heating, because Burned is all about electric generation, you know, and how bad biomass is for electric generation. They were absolutely right about that. But they were asked about heating, and they were, you know, they really didn't have anything to say about it. I don't think that they ever intended to conflate biomass for electric generation with clean, renewable wood heating. Chemical conversion, gasification, biochemical conversion, biodiesel, large-scale power plants, large-scale wood chip heating plants, combined heat and power systems, and dirty 25% efficient electric generation. Could we possibly find a more screwed up concept for our bumper sticker? We need to stop using the word biomass when we're talking about heating. Just say clean, renewable wood pellet or chip heating. Words matter. This is important. I mean, what would our critics prefer? Everyone heat with oil and gas? Electric just doesn't work in cold climates like New England, at least not affordably, and certainly not in the vast majority of our existing buildings, which is where the vast majority of heating pollution comes from. People need to understand that it is so difficult to bring a new technology to the market. I've watched this industry struggle for more than a decade to get the technology working in the field, the bulk delivery infrastructure, the service techs, the companies that failed during that time, and the constant battle to hold on to incentives. This industry is a model of public-private partnership, and in many ways, it's our last best hope to hold back this huge sector of the climate crisis. People need to understand that if some new technology was available right now, it would still take a decade to implement it in the field, and we don't have that kind of time. Maybe I'm just too idealistic, but I have to believe that if the anti-biomass folks understood the physics of heating and the realities of heating technology, that at least in terms of the heating sector, they could separate out the biomass for electricity problem and actually help us help them fight climate change. We're better off incentivizing working forests than losing them to development. We're better off sequestering carbon for generations in our buildings and wood products. And we're better off using that waste wood that's going to give up its carbon footprint anyway to heat our homes and businesses. And for now, we're just stuck with heating solutions that are better but not perfect, and that's just reality. So we do need a bumper sticker, and I spent a long time thinking about this, and we do need to be visible. So I wanted to bounce this idea of signage off you people in the room. Kind of a best practices seal. You know, other best practices seal are stagnant. The LEED certification, I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the same seal every time. It meets a certain standard. But the sustainable heating seal is site specific, right? So that QR code down there on the right, that returns a web page with the building's clean heat story, right? We can include links to architects and engineers, products and stakeholders. We can talk about the climate implications, and hopefully we can tell a good story about the source wood procurement. We'll definitely make it searchable with the express purpose of winning earned media. We can include video. And by focusing on a building specific concept, we tell your story and we get to educate more people. It says it right here. Learn more about this project and how we can all heat cleaner. Now, we don't make any money in this, but your story serves as a model of what others can do. So let us help you tell your story with data. Send us an email and we can help set up your own free climate smart heating presentation that complete with key talking points and co-branded with your company logo and the sustainable heating imprint. Just send me an email to get started. I'd be happy to talk to you. So I want to thank you for your attention. And before we get to questions, if you got value out of this webinar today, I invite you to visit our website and hit the donate button or follow us on social media. Use us. Please drop me a line if you'd like me to present the case to your group. And today we have our Director of Development on the call. So if you want to brainstorm about partnering on a campaign, you can private message through the chat with Jennifer Kay or reach out to either of us on email. Jim, are there any questions that came in? So thank you again. And if Jim's got questions, I'm happy to answer them. Jim, you want to pull the screen back from me?
Yes, well, let's see here. We'll leave this one up for now, and I'll just say if you've got questions, and I'll shift in a little bit here. But Bart had a number of comments about heat pumps. He thinks you're not giving them full justice, especially the latest generation of cold climate heat pumps that are out there. Thinking that they can work, they're maintain 75 to 80% of capacity at -13. And there's a number of good things he says about that, so people can refer to his comment there. And since
So,
they can
I respond, Jim?
Sure, go right ahead.
So I ask this question every talk I give, and we've written about it on this is a real concern, and we talk about it on the website in depth. And what I've learned doing this over the past more than 10 years is that everyone that uses, you can see here this orange triangle. And if you've got a super insulated building, you're going to need some mechanical ventilation. And you can do that with an ERV. But every one of those buildings that I've come across, they have a wood stove, a pellet stove, they have something that's helping the wood, that's helping the cold climate heat pump out. I have not found that they work down to 13 degrees below or even close to that number. But if you have, my email is up there. Let's have a conversation. I'm coming to your house and I want to do a story on you. I've actually been involved in way more. My experience is way more being involved in conversations on forums where people are shocked that they put in cold climate heat pumps, and they've got $1,000 energy bills in January and February. The other point I'd make is that I think Efficiency Vermont, who's another partner of ours, was really pushing that as opposed to pellet boilers, and I think they've over the past many years become way more even-handed about that, and I think they're doing a better job trying to set expectations. But if you're heating your house with a heat pump alone at 13 degrees below, first of all, you must live in a pretty good thermos, and let me know, because we want to do a story on it.
Actually, I would comment that at a recent, what was it, the Vermont Sustainable Energy group here, I can't recall exactly the name, I'm sorry about that, but they did a recent conference back in January, and they had a poll, and the poll came out, the poll question was, what's the best cold climate solution? And they actually said a heat pump with a pellet stove. That won number one, and then I think it was a pellet boiler came in close to that, and so forth. But I think there's a good concept there, is that you have this ability to offset in those really cold periods. And that is obviously, it's real world. That's what we could say right now. This is real world. You could afford that combination, and a pellet boiler as an alternative, which actually the installation costs of a pellet boiler and a heat pump are not that far apart from each other. And Bart says there's also electricity storage is coming to play. And that can be good, both on the grid as well as maybe individual homes. Maybe it's going to be an off-grid home that is able to do these things. It's that, the heat pumps. I know of also an engineer up north who has a sort of a slush pond underneath part of his house that he is heating up to very low temperatures. It's not like it has to be 180, but he has an incredibly super insulated house, and he's using the heat pump to just bring that temperature up. It's really interesting uses of heat pumps that I've seen. There's even up in Canada, there was a proposal for a place that had an ice skating rink and heating, and they're transferring the heat back and forth summer and winter, and doing these interesting things between these different functioning buildings and structures. So that's, there's all kinds of good ideas out there using heat pumps, and boy, aren't we excited about that? I mean, to me, that's just great. I'm not just a biomass guy, for sure. There's lots of interesting things. So Bart's got some comments there. I want you to read through those. Cost performance of pellet boilers is probably better than heat pumps for heating. True. But if you want the air conditioning, obviously that's one of those things you can say. Let's see. Glenn has a long thing about how biomass is CO2. He says biogenic carbon is added directly to the atmosphere. How do the trees distinguish between CO2 from fossil fuels versus CO2 from burning wood? Okay, we can get into that.
It's a matter of the source. It's a matter of the source. The biogenic is constantly circulating in the atmosphere and not adding to the total cumulative carbon in the atmosphere. As soon as we pull it out of the ground and burn it, it's adding to the total cumulative carbon in the atmosphere, and that's what we need to stop doing.
Yeah,
it's not that the trees need to identify. He's right. To them, carbon is carbon. it's whether or not we're pulling it out of the ground or reusing and recycling the carbon that's already there.
Yes, exactly. What is the actual direct connection between the wood burning appliance and the trees that are claimed to be absorbing that CO2?
You know, I wish Adam Sherman, and maybe is Professor Melsheimer on the call? You know,
I don't think he is, but if he was.
Um, you have to understand and be able to explain better than I can what's actually going on at the landscape level, right? It's not like this is my tree and I'm using it to heat. It is trees are growing and dying all the time, you know, and so when we have all the other factors that I talked about, I don't want to repeat myself. We preserve land from development. We sequester part of that harvest permanently in buildings and furniture. It's a complex system. Jim, I hope you took your screen back from me.
I did that.
Okay,
Yeah, just
good. Otherwise,
okay.
we were being attacked.
No, okay, we're not. Let me go back to the chat here. I've sort of, okay, have I lost that? Where is it? Where is it here? Darn it. It's funny how things
I want to
change.
continue the conversation. You know, hopefully they captured my email. And,
You know, that's absolutely right. And that's what I love about you, Jeff, is that you just have this conversation going. The technology keeps changing, the concepts. We learn things all the time. So that's great. Well, you know, Glenn has a number of points that he's made here, which is just great here. We love to hear that. And I want to know, you know, one thing, Glenn, I also want to say is that we don't expect to heat Manchester, New Hampshire, Nashua. You know, it's like I say, this incrementalism. This is what's real right now. What does the market get people to do? And when we're in natural gas territory, when somebody is sitting in Manchester, they're going to look for their new boiler. And guess what? They're going to go on natural gas. They aren't going to put in a pellet boiler. It's just not going to happen, whether that's industrial or down to the smallest residence. We're talking rural New England here. Their choice is oil or propane or electric of some sort. That's it. Or we can talk about some wood pellet system. We're not trying to save the earth. We're trying to basically say this is a region that can depend upon its forestry, and it's you know, we can encourage the forestry, and it works really well, as Jeff's explained. So that's really a lot of it. And sure, the atmosphere is overburdened. The forest could sequester more, but there's all these different angles here at work. It's not just a pure and simple kind of explanation. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Jennifer says, great to meet everyone. I can be reached at, well, that's Jennifer K.
Oh, Jennifer. Jennifer is our development director.
Okay.
And, she's terrific. So connect with her.
There you go. Jonathan says, be very careful with QR codes. Any mar on the code will send the consumer to another website, one that you may regret. Okay. It's
Jonathan
okay.
Parrott. Is that Jonathan Parrott? Thank you so much, man, for dialing in. I really appreciate it.
That's good. Rachel says, we are seeing a scary high percentage of heat pumps that leak refrigerant, and refrigerant can be on the order of 3,000 times worse than CO2 in terms of environmental degradation. And I refer to Paul Hawken and the, what's the term that I'm missing here? We're pulling, what is it? What is it? You must know it, Jeff. Paul Hawken and somebody tell me what that is. He's got a book and a website and everything, and it's all about pulling carbon. What are the things that we can do right now? What's the number one thing we should be doing right now to prevent carbon from going up in the atmosphere? And he says controlling CFCs is number one. Number one. So, you know, you have a car that leaked air conditioner freon. Let's go get more of it. Guess what? You've just 3,000 times, I mean, depending on volume and all this, but it's a terrible thing compared to just methane and CO2 and so forth. Well, methane's pretty bad, but it's worse than methane.
I don't want to always be bashing heat pumps. You know, my only measure is what works best for mitigating climate change. That's what I care about. That's what our organization is about. And
right.
I wrote a note. I wrote a note on that leaking refrigerant because it's worth a post about it.
It really is. And I think maybe somebody knows that word that I'm thinking of here that Paul Hawken is. I'm so sorry. But the other thing is, let's see here. The refrigerants are also, if you're an HVAC guy, you are recovering refrigerant as often as you can. But if something leaks, it leaks. That's just kind of the way it is. Okay, here's Bart says, your claim of needing 180 degrees is not true. The more important point was full capacity at 5 degrees F. Full capacity of a heat pump. So a building needs to be set up. It needs to be insulated as such so that it can deal with the lower temperatures that a heat pump kicks out. That's probably one of the key things. And when it gets really cold outside, it doesn't feel quite as warm. And that's where people would want to have this and keep the electricity off. Maybe you've got a point on that as well.
Well, just that, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Weatherization, insulation, weather sealing, absolutely is we need to stop the heat loss as much as possible. The question is how much insulating and weather sealing, how low can you get that heat loss? And in an existing building, I've never met a weatherization contractor that says you're going to save X. They'll never tell you, because they don't know. They're going to seal up everything they can. They're going to do a blower door test. They're going to test for air leakage. And are you going to save, if you got a $3,000 oil bill, is it going to go down to $1,000? No, it's not. We could go nuts and spend tons of money on deep energy retrofits and more. And certainly, I think, you got to build responsibly. Anything new these days, you want to super insulate and have energy recovery ventilation there.
Okay.
But, there's just practical real world limitations. I'm reading something. Supply temperatures refer to hot water temperature. Air-to-air heat pumps do not need to deliver. Air-to-air heat pumps can't deliver 180 degrees. 140 is no max.
But he's saying that practically you don't really need that. And there's another one. Bill Haley has a comment here. I wanted to read Vaughn's, though. It says Siegenthaler graphics out of date, cold climate heat pumps, grounds and HPs work. Don't have to diss heat pumps in order to advance the cause of wood heating. And I agree.
No, I am not dissing heat pumps, and I hope I didn't come off as dissing them. I'm merely trying to compare the realities, the real life realities of what's available. As I said, so let me stress this point because maybe I went over it too quickly. Using a heat pump in the shoulder season to reduce your fossil fuel heating load. We had a situation where somebody just put in a brand new oil boiler. They didn't want to take it out, and I understand they just spent a lot of money on that. So, but what they've done is they've reduced, especially because they're here on Green Mountain Power where our grid is so clean, right? They've reduced their carbon footprint by using a heat pump to use in the shoulder seasons. And when it gets below where the heat pump is, I don't know if that's 20 degrees or 5 degrees, or we heard here in the seminar it's 13 degrees below. You turn on your oil system and you can stay warm. That is a completely legitimate way to reduce your carbon footprint.
Okay.
And we promote that.
Bill has a great story here, and I'll read it quickly here. It says, I live in the Lake region of New Hampshire in a duplex that we own and share with my mother-in-law. I installed a 30 kilowatt pellet boiler with a 3-ton storage in 2015 for one side, and in 2017 during a remodel of the other side, I installed a Mitsubishi Hyper heat pump as the sole source of heat for that side of the house. This is probably, being that they replaced the boiler or whatever it was, it's probably a 25, 30-year-old condo. So, of a sort of standard of that era, perhaps even older. Maybe you can update us on that, Bill. But this past winter, my 89-year-old mother-in-law was living in the heat pump side, and they kept the house at 76. And the only time we had an issue was the 4-day period at the end of January where the house temp dropped to 72. So she loved 76, as many older people do. In 2018, I added 32 kilowatt of solar panels to the duplex, and it produces all the electricity used by both sides. Both sides. I agree with you on the fluctuation of power available versus power needed with solar. Basically, we're using the grid as our battery. And then he
So,
says, my experience is not down to -13 because we have never seen that, and I hope I never do, but we're going to see that.
yeah.
We're going to see that. Okay, go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. One is the configuration of the duplex. Is it side by side, or is the pellet boiler side on the main floor and the other apartment is above it, right? Because we know if we keep floors warm, that helps reduce heat load. The other question I have is on the or what are those shared walls, right? Because perhaps the heat pump side is benefiting from the boiler side. And thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to talk offline. The other point, of course, is what is the monthly bill in the dead of winter, and how cold does it really get? So those are the factors.
Yep, gotcha. Okay. Let's see here. Here's Robbo says, from a forest management perspective, it is critical to understand the natural mortality rate in our maturing, poor quality forests. This is hard to model. So, so our best forestry projects will be reducing the mortality for the next 20 years or so. John says, thanks, Jeff.
So let me comment on that. The Nature Conservancy, which we know is a fantastic organization, has carbon projects around the country where they buy large tracts of land. Sometimes it's untouched, sometimes it's working forest. And what they do is they sell those carbon credits on the California market. And the inventory the process to inventory the carbon that's in a forest is so difficult and so onerous. It couldn't be done by anybody that wasn't a big organization. So the difficulty in understanding, are our carbon stocks in forests increasing or are they decreasing over what period of time, is well, certainly it's outside my range to speak specifically about it, other than it is a very complex thing to try and get our arms around.
Okay. Hey, the word I was thinking about was drawdown. There's a book called Drawdown. It's by Paul Hawken and a group of people, and there's a website called Drawdown. So please look that up. I think you'll be very impressed with what they've done. And again, it's just like that real world. We're here right now. We have these resources, what is the average guy able to do and all of that. So he wants you to just focus on what's number one. And it's just great. There's a list that's right on the website there that I really encourage you. So check that out. Let's see here.
Hey, Jim, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is there any way to save the chats?
Yes, there is. I can do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to look through them.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm just gonna go. Yes, pellets in New England forests are a good match. Bart says, okay. The heat pump side was built in 1895 with cellulose insulated walls. That's a much older house than I thought.
Awesome. That's terrific.
Side by side duplex. That's amazing. I mean, that's a good study right there to find out what they've done to that house to make it do what it does.
That is.
Here we go. Dave Anderson from the Forestry Society, New Hampshire, SPNHF. He says, thanks for this presentation. The biogenic carbon cycle versus fossil carbon argument is basic and not as widely understood by the general public. The other argument for creating markets for low-grade wood is the economics of maintaining forests as forests. Landowners have viable forestry options. The anti-forestry folks tend to ignore the law of unintended consequences. With the continued erosion of low-grade markets, only the high-grade products reach market, and more open space is considered empty space and no longer economically viable or productive and predisposed to conversion to non-forest use. The social and economic legs of the stool, often not as visible to the public, the non-heat energy geeks, as the ecological leg. and they need to become Captain Obvious. Okay. So from the forestry perspective, that again, that real practical, real world experience of what foresters, what landowners, what advice they're getting, what's the best practice on the ground right there in that, a 20 acre or 100 acre stand, whatever it is.
Thank you for that comment. That was thoughtful.
It's very good. Very good. That's the last comment I have. And we have a number of people still in the session. If you've got a question, please ask. But otherwise, we'll be winding down. So I'll just say next week, we're going to be telling the story about some of our dry chip boiler installations, especially the specific one having to do with the St. Johnsbury School, the big school, single, it's all K through 12, I believe, school. Maybe it's K through 8, but anyway, big school, lots of kids, and another one in Campton, New Hampshire. And it'll tell the story about what we're doing for these basically rural schools, even though St. Johnsbury sounds like a big city, but it's really a rural area that doesn't have natural gas, and they're doing their best to do things right. Okay, any other questions here? Let's see, we've got chat. No more chat, I don't think so, and some 20 people left here, but Jeff, I want to say thank you. And by the way, sure, if you've got any questions for Jeff, I have his email address here, jrubin@sustainableheating.org. Go check out his website at sustainableheating.org. And check us, we'll find this on YouTube very soon. So you'll be able to find that as we get an edited copy of this that'll be online. And if you've got any more questions or requests for slides or whatever, send it to me, Jim@FrulinEnergy.com. So Jeff, again, thank you very much for doing this. I'll forward the chat to you, and if anybody has questions, I'll forward those to you as well.
Super. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Hope to see everybody next week at the next webinar, and these will go. Got another one on the 18th and a further one on the 25th. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.